It's 1432 Heavy, roger, sir. You have our apologies. We appreciate your professionalism.
It's happened on more than one occasion that an air traffic controller has done me a favor to keep me out of trouble. But that transmission is what it sounds like when a pilot does something to keep a controller out of trouble. However, that exact same pilot also did something to create a confusion, even though there was good intentions behind it. Here's the full audio.
Austin Tower, FedEx 1432 Heavy, passing 5.4 for the Cat 3 ILS 18 left.
FedEx 1432 Heavy, Austin Tower, 18 left, RVR, touchdown 1,400, midpoint 600, roll out 1,800, 18 left, clear to land.
Clear to land, 18 left, FedEx 1432 Heavy.
Tower, Southwest 708, we're short of 18 left, we're ready.
Southwest 708, Austin Tower, runway 18 left, RVR 1,200, midpoint 600, roll out 1,600. Flight heading 170, runway 18 left, clear for takeoff, traffic 3 mile final is a heavy 767.
Okay, 170, cleared for takeoff, 18 left, copy the traffic, Southwest 708.
Now, all this is happening in Austin, which is an airport I'm very familiar with. I used to fly there all the time, actually. And a lot of times when I'd go in there, there'd be a lot of low fog that would hang at that airport, especially early in the mornings. So you'd have this low-level fog, and you'd be clear up above, and there'd be just a couple hundred feet where the visibility was terrible. So you'd see it when you were coming into land. You'd have to shoot a whole regular approach, but it wouldn't be like where you're going through a lot of clouds. It'd be clear, 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 clouds, fog, and then you'd come out 200 feet above the ground and then land. It's something that's kind of unique to certain places in the world, Texas being one of those places. And when I say a Cat 3 landing, I'm talking about a Category 3 landing, not the cat that makes the meow, which some pilots love to do on different radio frequencies in the US. Now, this is a typical approach plate in Austin. And you see here on the left, it says RVR 18. RVR means runway visual range. And they basically have these machines along the sides of runways in certain airports. Not every airport has it. But it gauges just how far the visibility is in a place like this, where the fog or clouds might be often at that airport. So on this approach plate here, you see where it says RVR 18. What that means is 1,800 feet, or right below it, you see 1/2 mile. And I know that 1,800 feet is not the same as a 1/2 mile, but these RVRs are able to get more precise. So it's either RVR of 1,800 or visibility of a 1/2 mile. So it can give you both. Maybe the RVR is not working at the airport at that particular time, so they need to have a backup. In that case, it's a 1/2 mile. They could make it less, but this is just the way it works out. When these approach plates come out, it'll say RVR something and or visual 1/2 mile. It'll give both. Now you'll see this one here. It says Cat 3 ILS, and below it says RVR 6. Now this, I'm getting into a lot of the legality stuff about being a pilot that you probably don't ever care about unless you plan on being a pilot. But this is the legality stuff that, as a pilot, it's not the fun stuff, flying the plane, it's the legality stuff. So this RVR 6 means when you have the runway visual range of 600 feet, you are able to land there if your plane has the capability to do that type of landing. Not every plane has this capability, but it will say basically 600 feet is the range that you're able to land if you're able to do a Cat 3 landing. Now with a Cat 3 landing, you as a pilot are not manually controlling the plane. It's doing an auto land. So your plane needs to have the capabilities to fly a normal approach on an autopilot, do the flare, roll out, track the center line, and stop, and do all those things by themselves. And the pilots in this case are just monitoring everything to make sure it is doing what it's supposed to be doing. But the pilots are not actually flying the plane in this case. It's called an auto land. And that's why you hear this pilot check in saying this.
Austin Tower, FedEx 1432 Heavy, passing 5.4 for the Cat 3 ILS 18 left.
So these pilots are roughly 5 miles out from the runway. They're checking in, they're letting the controller know where they're at, even though the controller has a sensor to know where they're at. But he's checking in with that, letting them know the approach that they're doing. And basically on the approach plate, if you were to look at it, they're right here. After that pilot checks in, the controller calls to the pilots and lets them know, okay, this is the current RVR for all 3 sections of the runway. Some runways will have 4 sections, some will have 3, some might have a situation where 1's not working and 2 are only working, and depending on different airlines and different rules, because we all don't follow the exact same rules, you may be able to land there, or you may need to have all 3 in order to land. It's all different at different airlines. So In this case, all three are working, so it doesn't really matter. But the controller calls back and says, these are the three different sections. This is the RVR, so that way the pilots know they're able to legally shoot the approach and try to land there. And that's why the controller says it right here.
FedEx 1432 Heavy Austin Tower, 18 left RVR, touchdown 1,400, midpoint 600, roll out 1,800, 18 left, clear to land.
As the FedEx pilots hear that, they then know, okay, great, we're able to legally shoot this approach and land there. So from their standpoint, everything is good. They have the visibility that they need. I'm guessing at this point they're probably fully configured and ready to land, because on these types of landings you want to have everything done and out of the way, because it's time to really focus. Both of you are inside looking at all the instruments, both pilots. Nobody's looking outside. Everybody's inside looking to verify the plane is doing everything that it's supposed to be doing. And if at any point there's an error message or any issue that shows up, boom, the plane goes back up, does a go around and tries it again. However, in this case, you hear these Southwest pilots, they're holding short of this exact same runway, and they check in right here.
Tower Southwest 708, we're short of 18 left, we're ready.
Now, Southwest has a reputation for moving fast, and that's not saying that they're moving in an unsafe way, but they do a lot of flights. These pilots will do 3-4 flights a day, whereas I might do one flight every 2 days or 3 days. So they're doing a lot of flights, and that means they're going to be moving faster. When a 747 gets out on the runway, we're moving slow. Everything's going really slow. We make it go slow so that way we don't miss everything. Whereas Southwest has a reputation for taxiing fast and moving quickly. And like I said, it's not unsafe, but they do things very quickly. So when they check in and they're holding short of that runway, there might be a situation where the controller is going to hear it's Southwest and let them go, thinking, okay, these guys are going to get out very quickly because they have the reputation of doing that. Whereas let's say I'm holding short of runway 18 left, and I'm not saying that I'm less competent of a pilot than a Southwest pilot, but they know that things are going to be moving a little bit slower when a 747 is going to take the runway, or a corporate aircraft, or an aircraft they're unfamiliar with. But Southwest, having the reputation of going fast, they're holding short. The controller thinks, okay, you guys are good to go. The plane is this far out from where they're going to be landing, which basically lets the pilots know, well, we can't dilly-dally on the runway. We need to get out and get going.
Okay, 170, cleared for takeoff, 18 left, copy the traffic, Southwest 708.
The problem is that pilots have a visibility requirement for takeoff. Just like we have one for landing, we also have the same thing for takeoff. It's a different visibility requirement, but we have to have a certain amount of visibility in order to safely take off. Now, the controller reads back what the visibility is. The pilots are going to check that and visually look outside to make sure that they have the visibility they need, and they're going to be moving slower than they normally would, because at the end of the day, it's better to be safe and do everything right than go quickly and then have a mistake. So that's where it starts to go bad. This right here is an example of a chart that we would use when we're taking off. You can see at this airport, it can go as low as 500 RVR. And that doesn't mean that you as a pilot can take off at 500 RVR. What it means is that that airport has the capability for you as a pilot to take off on a 500 RVR. Your airline is going to give you a different number. So your airline might say the lowest that you're ever allowed to take off as is 600. So your airline might say 600, and the airport has the capability of doing 500, so it means you're restricted to 600. However, on the other side of the airport, it's a different requirement. You see over here on 18 right, the lowest that you can take off is 1,000 RVR, which means if your lowest requirement you can take off is 600 at your airline, but that runway only allows you to do 1,000, you're restricted to 1,000. This is a lot of the legal part that you as a passenger will never ever see, but that's what's going on. We're checking all this stuff before we even leave the gate. This isn't happening while they're getting out onto the runway. We've already looked at it. Hey, we get assigned this runway. What's the visibility requirement? What's our visibility limitation? And we're looking at, okay, well, what do we need it to be? And in some cases, they'll be writing it down on that pad of paper that you see me write down that when I'm taxiing or before we go out and I go flying, I would write a note on there. Okay, we need 600 or we need 500 or whatever it is that's my limitation for that runway, and whatever is going to be my limitation for my airline, I'm going to write that number down and I'm going to have that there. So when the controller reads me RVR this, and this, I know, okay, cool, we're good to legally take off. Because if he were to read back something like RVR 500 and you're restricted to 600 and you take off, you could be in a lot of trouble. Now this next section, I left the pauses in there. A lot of times I delete them, but I left them in there so you can kind of see what's happening real world time as this whole thing plays out with the confusion of one taking off on top of another plane. Listen to this.
Tower, confirm FedEx 1432 Heavy clear to land on 18 left.
FedEx 1432 Heavy, that is affirmative, sir. 18 left, you are clear to land. Traffic departing prior to route 737.
Roger.
Southwest 70, confirm on the roll.
Rolling now.
Southwest aboard. FedEx is on the go.
Southwest 708, roger. You can turn right when able. Negative.
Now I'm going to have to make some assumption here because I wasn't in either flight deck and I haven't read a report on what's going on. I'm just listening to this audio. But here is my guess of what's going on. These FedEx pilots are coming in and they can either see that that plane is still on the runway because it's like I'm talking about low-level fog. They're there coming into land, which means until 100 feet or 200 feet over the runway, they're going to be able to see outside fine. So if that plane hasn't come up through the fog, they know that they're still on the runway. So that's a problem. Or they're able to see them for whatever reason. Sometimes with the fog, you can still see the plane moving, but you haven't figured it out. Or they're using the TCAS system, and I've talked about that in other videos. It's our traffic collision avoidance system. You're going to see another plane that's near you with their transponders on. You can see, okay, they're still on the runway. We're lined up on the runway. You're now going to see how close you're getting to that other plane. So it's one of those few scenarios that's going on from these FedEx pilots, and they're seeing okay, this is a potential problem. And that's why the FedEx pilot made this call here.
Southwest aboard.
The problem is that from the controller standpoint, that FedEx pilot that's saying that, he doesn't know who's making that call. Obviously, as you're listening to this from the comfort of your home or wherever you're at, you can hear that's one voice and you can tell. However, for that controller who's just listening and engaging everything that's going on, all he hears is Southwest aboard. So he doesn't know, he's thinking that it's Southwest saying, we're aborting our takeoff, and that's fine. Then FedEx says they're on the go. So the controller thinks, okay, Southwest is aborted, Southwest is going around, so everything's fine. Southwest, you can turn off right and then come back in and try again, is what he's thinking. However, that's not what's going on. Listen here to what Southwest says.
Negative.
The obvious concern for the FedEx pilots as they're above having a visual view of everything that's going on is that the Southwest plane is going to take off because they've already made the decision to go around. So when that pilot is calling to Southwest saying to abort, the Southwest pilots are probably going too fast. But his concern is that Southwest is going to take off right into them. That's going to be a big problem. Now, the traffic collision avoidance system would keep these planes apart, but you as a pilot are not going to rely on that system to protect you. So what he's trying to do is be proactive and hope that Southwest is maybe going slow enough that they'll abort their takeoff, but it sounds like they're moving too fast down the runway. And if you're the Southwest pilot, as you're moving down the runway really fast with low visibility, that's not really the time that you want to reject your takeoff. If you're going very quickly into a high-speed reject and you're just hearing Southwest abort, that's not air traffic control, or that's not the control tower saying, Southwest, your call sign, abort your takeoff. That's not what's going on. And even if it was, if you're going too fast, it's not going to be a safe time to do it. So the controller's thinking Southwest is aborting, Southwest is going too fast to abort, FedEx is asking to abort and saying they're going around. So you can see how all this confusion is happening. Now, the FedEx pilot, it's not really our place as a pilot to tell another plane what to do, but he's trying to avoid Southwest taking off into the bottom of them because obviously that's not good for anybody while they're out flying. So you have Southwest here on the runway going quickly, getting ready to take off. You have FedEx right on top of them doing a go-around, but they're moving faster because they have the momentum. And you have the guy in the control tower thinking right now Southwest has gotten off the taxiway, but Southwest has not gotten off the taxiway, and you heard that from their call when they said negative. Now, I saw some of the comments when this originally came out, and people were saying, oh, that controller messed up big time, blah, blah, blah. The problem is that the controller had an assumption, which is never great to do, but had an assumption that this Southwest pilot was going to move quickly and take off, because that is how they typically do things. If you've flown on Southwest, you'll notice that a lot of times you're going faster than the other planes around you while you're taxiing around on the runway. They taxi fast. And like I said, I've flown on Southwest all the time. I have friends at Southwest. They're very, very competent pilots. I don't think there's any problem with the way they do things. If I were to taxi that fast on my plane, all the other pilots I'm with would be a little bit uncomfortable because, well, it's a bigger plane, so there's more momentum, but it's just not the culture of what we do. So people are a little bit less hesitant to want to taxi that fast. However, at Southwest, it's totally normal. So this controller, when he tells him, hey, you got a plane on a short final, meaning they're going to be there very quickly, and tells him you're cleared for takeoff, he's expecting that guy to get on the runway and blast off. That would be the expectation because that is the way that Southwest normally does it. I wouldn't expect anything different if I was him. But the important thing to realize from the Southwest pilots is this right here.
Southwest 708 Austin Tower, runway 18 left RVR 1200, midpoint 600, roll out 1600. Flight heading 170, runway 18 left, clear for takeoff, traffic 3 mile final is a heavy 767.
The thing to remember here is that this pilot was given access to the runway. When you're given clearance for takeoff, that is your runway. If you want to go out there and go nice and slow like Miss Daisy, you're allowed to do that. However, it's just not normal that Southwest would do that. But from these pilots' standpoint, they're looking at the interests of safety. Their culture is to go quickly and get the flight done. However, low visibility, things are going to be moving slower. You need to make sure that you have the visibility requirements, everybody's ready. You have to be very focused for doing low visibility takeoffs. So that is the reality, is that these pilots aren't required to get off in a certain time frame. Typically, controllers slow things down when things are happening in a low visibility environment. So the pilots that are in the Southwest plane, they didn't do anything wrong by taking a long time to get off the runway and do their takeoff. They were in the right to do that. However, it got very confusing and it didn't go at all like planned. But this next part is really important to hear.
1432, climb maintain 3000, when able you can turn left heading 080.
Wind turn to 080 3000, FedEx 1432 heavy.
Southwest 70, you can turn left heading 170.
170, South 79.
It was a bad situation, and in some cases you will have pilots where they will act like a child because they feel they've been wronged. However, neither of these pilots were doing that. I think at this point, the FedEx pilots obviously know what was going on because they were trying to be air traffic control and fly the plane. They knew what had happened, but he's not being a baby about it and being difficult with air traffic control. It's a mistake. It was an honest mistake. I don't think the controller had any bad intentions at all whatsoever. The Southwest pilots, they were slow to get on the runway. They were doing what they needed to do to safely do their takeoff. They could have said something. Everybody, either pilot could have said something, but neither of them did. At this point, they're doing the most important thing while we're out flying, which is be a professional and fly the plane. Safely fly the plane, and then afterwards, once you get on the ground, you and air traffic control and whoever, because there's going to be some reports that are going to get written probably from both pilots and air traffic control, and the FAA is probably going to look into it to investigate how this happened, why it happened, and to prevent it from happening, because even though this wasn't an accident, it was a close call. And in aviation, a lot of times, if you can learn something without anybody getting hurt, that's the best time to learn. If these planes had taken off where Southwest had started climbing into this FedEx plane, they would have gotten told from their traffic collision avoidance system to maintain their altitude, which is not really what you want to hear, 500 feet off the ground. The FedEx plane would have got told to climb. And I'm sure there's two different ways you can do a climb. I'm sure they were doing the fastest climb they could because they were seeing all this play out. However, with them coming in and landing, they have a lot more speed and momentum to get past and in front of Southwest. So as soon as Southwest got out of the fog or clouds, they would have been able to see FedEx on their traffic collision avoidance system and probably visually to stay away from them. Listen to the call the FedEx pilots got as they came back around and landed again at Austin.
FedEx 1432 is heavy, is clear of the runway.
This 1432 heavy, roger, sir. You have our apologies. We appreciate your professionalism.
Thank you.
While the controller made the mistake by assuming that these Southwest pilots were going to get off in time, and I'm sure that's not a mistake that he'll ever make, it was a genuine, honest mistake in my opinion. The FedEx pilots, even though they created some confusion by telling Southwest to abort, which isn't really their place to do, again, they're trying to be safe, doing a go-around while telling another plane to abort, which the Southwest pilots chose not to do, probably because they were moving very fast. So there was a lot of different things that were going on here. At the end of the day, everybody remained professional. And the air traffic controller, even though he created a bit of this problem by letting Southwest go and attempt to take off while FedEx was close behind, I don't think that it was bad intention at all. If you enjoyed this video, check out this one over here. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.